This is the iPhone 16, and for most people, it's likely the best option available if you're looking for a new phone. While it doesn't carry the Pro label like the more expensive model released alongside it, the iPhone 16 did add quite a few Pro features this year, like the action button, macro photography, spatial photos and videos, amongst other things, and in many areas actually outperforms the iPhone 15 Pro from last year. Today, I'm gonna dig into those details and really my whole experience with the iPhone 16 over the last week, what's new this year, what's good, what's bad, and some surprising things that I found along the way. So if you're interested in the iPhone 16, maybe you're on the fence about buying one, or you can't decide if it's worth picking up, stick around and let's get into it. This video is sponsored by Taurus. Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. Over the past couple of years, Apple has released the regular iPhone as kind of a dumbed down version of the Pro from the previous year. There's always been one less camera lens and an aluminum housing instead of steel or titanium, and the new design features and chip updates that come out on the Pro have historically taken a year to make their way to the regular iPhone. But this year, that isn't quite the case. The chipset in the 16 skipped a generation and is actually more performant than the 15 Pro. You've got new controls that came out alongside the 16 Pro, more advanced charging options, updated Wi-Fi, and in my opinion, this is just a big leap forward. So let's just kick things off by looking at the visual updates. Design-wise, while the iPhone 16 is almost identical from the front and in size and weight to the iPhone 15 with a 6.1-inch display and weighing in at 171 grams, the similarities are fairly limited beyond that. While the model that I have here is black, which was offered last year, you've got a brand new selection of colors to choose from, which to me look a lot better than the previous year. They're actually bright, bold colors versus the muted ones that we saw last year, and it's also got a completely redesigned camera bump. Instead of that squared camera array that was on the 15, you've now got this pill-shaped island that suits the phone a lot better, and the stacked vertical lenses do enable the iPhone to shoot spatial content, which we'll touch on in a bit, but the most notable or impactful changes on the iPhone 16 are along the sides, where you've got two new buttons, the action button and the camera control. The action button is one of those things that carried over from the 15 Pro, and I have found super handy at times. I've used that for everything from the traditional mute switch to creating notes and launching ChatGPT, as well as third-party camera apps, and I do think it's a much better use of space than the mute switch that was there previously. My only real complaint with it is I wish there was a little more separation between it and the volume up button, because I often mistake the two for each other, but overall, it has been very useful. The camera control button, on the other hand, is brand new on both the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, and that sits just along the bottom right-hand side under the power button, and combines both capacitive touch with a physical button along with a haptic engine that controls a variety of different camera functions. The button itself sits pretty much flush with the edge of the phone, and I do find that I have to hunt for it a bit without a case on at times, but with a case that has a button cutout, I actually like the way that my thumb rests alongside it, and it does feel like a natural resting position. I am going to dive into camera control functionality in a moment, but before I do that, I just want to talk about the Ostand 360-degree spin case that I've been using with the iPhone 16 from Taurus. The thing that I love about this is it's not just a case, but an all-in-one solution that offers protection, enhances grip, and doubles as a stand for your phone. I've been using it constantly while I'm listening to music or podcasts. It's great for watching content, regardless if it's in landscape or portrait mode, and the ring grip makes it super easy to place on non-flat surfaces. On top of that, you get full MagSafe compatibility, it's drop-proof up to 12 feet, and what I was really surprised with is just how thin and light the case is. It's really no different in size than a regular case, and the rounded corners, tactile buttons, and camera control cutout give the case a great feel. Taurus offers the Ostand 360 spin case in a variety of colors for the whole iPhone lineup, along with their Glasgow screen protectors, so please check out the link in the description if you're interested. Now, as far as the actual camera control functionality, there is a lot to unpack there. Pressing on that button will launch your camera app, and you can use it as a shutter button by hard pressing the physical button. You can hold down on it to record a video, and when you soft press or half press it, it opens up a camera adjustment, which by default will control the zoom. That can then easily be adjusted by moving your finger along the surface of the control button, and to go to the menu to switch the control that you'd like to adjust, you can do that by double soft pressing it. Within that menu, there's a variety of different things, from the regular camera controls like depth and exposure to the all-new style and tone options. My one complaint with this control menu is that when you switch to video mode and bring it up, Apple has actually left all these options within here, and they've just grayed them out or disabled them, which is kind of confusing at first, and I'd prefer if they just weren't in there. I also find the controls themselves to feel a bit clunky, especially if you're trying to use them for vertical photos with one hand or scrolling through the menu, but I did have a similar feeling with the touch controls on the AirPods Pros when they first came out, so I do just want to give that a bit more time to see if I get used to it. Having said that, if you don't like those controls, you can still use the ones on screen, and Apple did add a style and tone adjustment button in the camera UI as well, but again, I'm not honestly a huge fan of that one either. With that selected, you're able to swipe through styles or filters by cycling through the viewport, similar to an Instagram filter, but you've also got this little pad on the bottom or side, depending on how you're holding the phone, where you can customize the tone and color. I find that to be extremely sensitive, and I would have preferred if those were just dials. If you're looking to adjust the style and tones within your image, you're much better off just adjusting it through the slider in the camera control, as it's just a lot simpler and more straightforward. When it comes to the physical camera setup, this is still relatively the same as the iPhone 15, as the main camera is a 48 megapixel sensor with an f1.6 aperture just like last year, while the ultrawide got a slight upgrade with a 12 megapixel sensor and an f2.2 aperture, which does capture a little more light than the f2.4 lens from last year. The glass on both of those lenses do have a slight improvement over the iPhone 15 and the 15 Pro, with a new anti-reflective coating to prevent things like flaring. That does make a big difference in the right circumstances, and standard photos off the main lens look great. Again, they have a similar look to them as last year, where you'll get a 24 megapixel image off the main lens that takes the detail from a 48 megapixel image and combines it with the light information from a 12 megapixel binned image to produce an optimized 24 megapixel one. If you take a photo at 2x zoom, that produces a 12 megapixel photo that is essentially cropping in from the main lens, so there's no digital zoom happening there, which is nice. And in both scenarios, you're going to get an HDR optimized image that brings down blown out or really bright areas of the image and brings up any dark parts, so you will get a clean, crisp image, although it can tend to flatten things out or crush the contrast. To combat that a bit, you can adjust that with a different tone and styles, and those are all contextually aware, so if you want something that's really vibrant, iOS is smart enough to know to saturate the colors of objects around you in your setting without blowing out your skin color. Playing around with those every time you take a photo obviously isn't ideal, and within the camera app settings you can set a photographic style to default to, but instead of selecting one that exists in the camera app, you have to select 4 photos, which I find doesn't really align to the filters that Apple gives you, so I've just left that off. The nice thing is you can always adjust styles after you've taken a photo in the Photos app, so you don't necessarily have to fiddle with that beforehand. Those styles will apply to the ultra-wide camera as well, where you'll get similar results, and you do see a noticeable improvement in both low-light photos and a little bit in daylight over the iPhone 15 ultra-wide, along with some other added benefits that you didn't have last year. The ultra-wide lens can now shoot macro photos, which was previously only a Pro feature, which is nice to have if that's something that you're into. And that lens also now has autofocus. That won't make a huge difference for photos, but is likely more helpful on the video side of things. Speaking of video, you can now shoot both spatial photos and videos that, again, were only previously available on the Pro models, and probably something only a small number of people will use, where essentially you can shoot an image or a video in 3D space for use in a VR headset later, which is kinda neat. The Pro model does pull ahead quite a bit with video as far as recording formats and options go, and I will do more of a direct comparison between the iPhone 16 and the 16 Pro in a couple of weeks after I go over the Pro next week. So if you'd like to see either of those videos, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, but in any case, the video off the iPhone 16 looks great, and I have noticed that the phone itself does warm up quite a bit while recording, but the way it disperses heat is quite different from the 15. Part of that is likely the new cooling system that Apple announced in the iPhone 16 lineup, which does seem to be making a considerable difference in resource-heavy tasks like recording video and for things like gaming. Looking at the thermal imaging when you're running benchmarks, you can see that the iPhone 16 is much more effective at cooling than the 15, and the performance in general is much better than last year. As I said, the iPhone 16 skipped a generation with its chipset going from the A16 in the iPhone 15 to the A18 this year, and it not only beats the iPhone 15 in performance, but the 15 Pro as well. In benchmarks, the iPhone 16 outperforms the 15 Pro by anywhere between 10 and 14%, depending on the test, which is impressive, but is really all kind of relative to what you're doing. For most people, performance isn't something that we even pay attention to anymore, but if you're someone who does a lot of gaming or maybe editing photos or videos to a lesser extent, it can still be really important. With my own use, I've been able to do anything no problem, whether that's editing photos in Lightroom, using social apps, recording videos, gaming, you name it. The iPhone 16 is the first base iPhone to support ray tracing as well, and you do get a bump in RAM, which is mostly because of Apple Intelligence, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But everything on here runs smooth as butter with one big drawback. The display on here tops out at 60 Hz, so even with a powerful chip that could probably run a lot of these games at much higher frame rates, the 60 Hz panel will limit the effective frame rate to 60 frames per second. Outside that, I know a lot of people dislike that Apple is still putting 60 Hz displays in iPhones, and I get it. Especially if you're used to using a 120 Hz panel like the one in the Pro models. The movement does feel quite choppy, and it's definitely something that I noticed as soon as I moved to the regular 16 from my 15 Pro. I have gotten used to it over time, and there are still times where after a week, I'll notice things stuttering between animations, but it doesn't change the functionality at all, and for most people who aren't tech enthusiasts, they likely won't notice. Honestly, I don't know how much of the general population even knows what 60 or 120 Hz even means, but it is probably something that should be updated at this point. But outside of that, the display does have some really great things going for it. The color, like all of Apple's products, looks great when you're watching content or editing photos. It goes up to 2000 nits like last year and is easily viewable outdoors, but on the flip side to that, it can now go all the way down to 1 nit for viewing in the dark. There's also supposed to be a stronger ceramic shield on the display to prevent scratches, which I'm not going to test for obvious reasons, but in a general sense, you're getting relatively the same display as last year. The one benefit of having the same display with a lower refresh rate is battery life is often a lot better, and that is one of the bigger differences I noticed coming from the 15 Pro to the regular 16. I've been on my phone all day and been running fairly battery-heavy apps like Sleeper, where it's constantly connected to a network transferring data back and forth, and even then, it barely puts a dent in it. Now, if you're using the camera a lot, especially for video, it will suck back the power, but just with everyday general use, where my 15 Pro would barely get me through a full day, the 16 lasts me a full day and goes into the next no problem, and charging was improved this year as well, with both the 16 and 16 Pro supporting MagSafe charging up to 25 watts, which will give you about a 50% charge in 20 to 30 minutes or so, and a full charge in about an hour. It does warm up a little bit charging wirelessly, but nothing that I've been overly concerned about. And speaking of wireless, the Wi-Fi spec was upgraded as well, as the iPhone 16 now supports Wi-Fi 7, where the last generation topped out at Wi-Fi 6. I only have a Wi-Fi 6E system, so I can't effectively test Wi-Fi 7, but Everything has been super fast with absolutely no connection issues, and there really haven't been any issues at all on the iPhone 16. That being said, there is one element of these phones that I really can't review yet that's only in beta, and that's Apple Intelligence, which could have huge ramifications on almost everything that we've gone over today. We know for sure that Apple plans on using the camera control with AI. Siri will potentially see a huge upgrade, and there are a bunch of features coming that could drastically affect things like battery life with so many network requests happening, and using the neural engine a lot more, but I can't really say too much about it right now with it being unfinished, but I will definitely follow up on this video as that becomes available. As far as the things that we can touch right now, I really like a lot of these upgrades. I like the new design and the colors that Apple offers. It's great to see the action button show up, the internals run faster and cooler, and you have a lot more control over how you take photos and what they look like. I am still on the fence with the camera control, although admittedly I am still kind of getting used to it, so we'll see how I feel as time passes. And while the 60Hz panel is probably fine for most people, I think it is getting long in the tooth, and it is the one glaring thing that sticks out that should be upgraded here. I know there's a lot to go over and digest here, so if there's anything that you want to bring up that I didn't mention in this video, or some things that you want to see in the comparison with the 16 Pro, or even some things that you like about the regular 16, please drop a comment down below. That's all I have for you today. If you found this video useful or enjoyable, feel free to hit that like button. If you want to see more tech-related content or help me design a phone case that doubles as a pencil eraser, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next upload.